Jag slagar pancine viltis. Vad gör jag ligar tapajuru? Vad sagt och tungar bäst. Varpas likimo nu aini väl. Jura pangas. Saces śmiego kilają, apginti savo garbę.
Hello and welcome to the magical city of Palanga by the Baltic Sea, known for its long-standing orchestral music tradition, counting already a second century. It was probably brought by Count Tiškević from the old Europe during his late 19th century trips. But nobody really knows where it all began. It's been some struggle to preserve the orchestral music traditions initiated by the Counts. Nevertheless, today, Palanga is proud to host the exceptionally prestigious and essential for the region European Brass Band Championships of 2020. So the local guys and girls want to show how to make the best of Palanga. All options are possible for you to get here. Get on a plane, on a boat, a train, a bus or a car. And when you're here, take the smaller means to get around. Don't worry about the accommodation. We will get our cozy local homes, as well as fancy hotels ready for any type of request. Dining in a blue sky beach in addition to your stay can also be, indeed, rejuvenating. Choose from a variety of eating places. We will invite you to some of the most gourmet restaurants in the city. Well, if these guys also let us, I do guarantee you will find the best entertainment here. The rides, the water fun, the souvenirs, the park, and place for your children, the cinema, the pool, some spas. Whoa, come down now. And a marvelous amber museum. So we can offer you lots and lots to experience. And we are very much looking forward for you to see our stunning concert hall.
Yes. One coffee, please. Want it strong and memorable as the breaking waves of the Baltic Sea. Now, I'm ready.
Folk art nowadays refers to artful handicrafts created and used by peasants dating to the period of traditional village society. Talking about folk art, we most often have in mind the 19th century village, partly because most surviving collected artwork dates to this period. It also was the time when peasants had gotten wealthier and acquired more beautiful things. Compared to urban artisan creations, peasants' handicrafts were simpler and less refined, but making them still required a lot of skill in imagination. The best handicrafts served a very long time, were cherished, and then handed down to children and grandchildren. Village women were appreciated for their ability to weave all textiles needed for their household. Their work would start with preparing wool and flax fiber. Distaffs, spinning wheels and looms stood in every house. Before yarn reached the loom, it had already passed through a woman's fingers many times. It had been spun, twisted, dyed, wound and rewound. Finally, the yarn would be warped for weaving on large rotating rods. There was a great variety of monuments, simple and very elaborate, ornate. Cross-crafting often included other different artisans into the process. A carpenter erected the cross, a god sculptor carved sculptors, the blacksmith forged an ornamental iron cross for the top. Together, they created one harmonious piece of art. Cross-crafting was an important cultural and spiritual custom in Lithuania, which also provided us with many valuable pieces of art. In 2001, UNESCO proclaimed this tradition a masterpiece of intangible heritage of humanity.
Yes. One coffee, please. Want it strong and memorable as the breaking waves of the Baltic Sea. Now, I'm ready.
Hello, and welcome to the magical city of Palanga by the Baltic Sea, known for its long-standing orchestral music tradition, counting already a second century. It was probably brought by Count Tiškević from the old Europe during his late 19th century trips. But nobody really knows where it all began. It's been some struggle to preserve the orchestral music traditions initiated by the counts. Nevertheless, today, Palanga is proud to host the exceptionally prestigious and essential for the region European Brass Band Championships of 2020. So the local guys and girls want to show how to make the best of Palanga. All options are possible for you to get here. Get on a plane, on a boat, a train, a bus or a car. And when you're here, take the smaller means to get around. Don't worry about the accommodation. We will get our cozy local homes, as well as fancy hotels ready for any type of request. Dining in a blue sky beach in addition to your stay can also be, indeed, rejuvenating. Choose from a variety of eating places. We will invite you to some of the most gourmet restaurants in the city. Well, if these guys also let us, I do guarantee you will find the best entertainment here. The rides, the water fun, the souvenirs, the park, and place for your children, the cinema, the pool, some spas. Whoa, come down now. And a marvelous amber museum. So we can offer you lots and lots to experience. And we are very much looking forward for you to see our stunning concert hall.
Dali pūļa
Hello, and welcome to the magical city of Palanga by the Baltic Sea, known for its long-standing orchestral music tradition, counting already a second century. It was probably brought by Count Tiškević from the old Europe during his late 19th century trips. But nobody really knows where it all began. It's been some struggle to preserve the orchestral music traditions initiated by the Counts. Nevertheless, today, Palanga is proud to host the exceptionally prestigious and essential for the region European Brass Band Championships of 2020. So the local guys and girls want to show how to make the best of Palanga. All options are possible for you to get here. Get on a plane, on a boat, a train, a bus or a car. And when you're here, take the smaller means to get around. Don't worry about the accommodation. We will get our cozy local homes, as well as fancy hotels ready for any type of request. Dining in a blue sky beach in addition to your stay can also be, indeed, rejuvenating. Choose from a variety of eating places. We will invite you to some of the most gourmet restaurants in the city. Well, if these guys also let us, I do guarantee you will find the best entertainment here. The rides, the water fun, the souvenirs, the park, and place for your children, the cinema, the pool, some spas. Whoa, come down now. And a marvelous amber museum. So we can offer you lots and lots to experience. And we are very much looking forward for you to see our stunning concert hall.
Yes. One coffee, please. Want it strong and memorable as the breaking waves of the Baltic Sea. Now, I'm ready.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 13th Annual Baltic Sea Region Tourism Forum. My name is Vytautas Ulazas, and I have the privilege to host this first warm-up session of the Baltic Tourism Forum. As you possibly noticed, 2020 is not the most typical year so far, right? So will be the Tourism Forum. We were very excited to welcome you to our beautiful country of Lithuania and to show you our coastal gem, the city of Palanga. Unfortunately, this year it is not possible. So at least we shared some videos so you could have a little taste of Lithuania, and we wanted to beckon you to come visit us in, we hope, the very near future. So after lengthy discussion, we decided that we don't want to postpone the forum this year. Therefore, for the first time, it is done completely online. A quick overview of what is to come throughout this week. The forum is spread over the better half of the week, a total of 4 days, and I will start from the end. We kindly invite you to join us on Thursday, the 12th of November, for our main event. There's a number of inspiring professionals from all around the Baltic Sea region, eager to share their insights and set a direction for the future, together with you. Online registration and coffee will start from 9:30 a.m. Lithuanian time. And tomorrow, on Wednesday, the 11th of November, I invite you to the very first Baltic Sea Region Sustainable Tourism Awards. This initiative stemmed in Lithuania, and I'll be honest, we were a little bit worried if it will get the traction necessary. However, we were pleasantly surprised by the general interest and the number of applications we have received, which proves that such a platform is meaningful. We will acknowledge the most sustainable practices of tourism in 3 categories: the most sustainable destination, the most sustainable product and exceptional services, and the most sustainable private tourism services provider or a business. If you want to find out who are the best in the Baltic Sea region in the field of sustainable tourism, get your tuxedos and cocktail dresses ready and tune in tomorrow from 2 to 4 p.m. Lithuanian time. Well, but that's the future, and let's enjoy the present. Today is a warm-up of the main event, and it is dedicated to more practical presentations that will focus on sustainability and youth. The theme of the day is reviving tourism in the times of global change. Before we begin, a bit of practical information. I sincerely encourage you to not only spectate, but to participate. Underneath the video, you will see a link to Slido. It is a platform that will enable us to communicate. Do have in mind that you need to have your browser cookies enabled for it to work properly. Please be active and post questions for the speakers, and I will be more than happy to announce them. Do not wait until the end of the presentation, post them as they come up, and have in mind that you can also rate questions of others to make sure that they are on top and delivered to the speaker. And last but not least, the conference will be recorded, so in case you will miss a bit that's important to you, do not worry. You will have the opportunity to rewatch the whole content later. So with no further ado, let me introduce you to the first speaker. Mr. Vitaly Vladikin, Research Manager at Euromonitor International. Vitaly joined Euromonitor International, the world's leading provider of business intelligence on industries, countries, and consumers, back in 2008. And in his current role, he is responsible for managing a team of experienced analysts who conduct research programs for consumer markets in Eastern Europe and Nordic countries. The team focuses on strategic analysis and monitoring key trends and developments across numerous FMCG, that is, fast-moving consumer goods categories, such as retailing, travel, food service, and payment cards. And the topic of his presentation is the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism industry, new reality and new opportunities. Please be active, post questions, enjoy the conference, and please welcome Vitaly Vladikin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of the forum. First of all, thank you for joining the event and my presentation. Today I will use the next 30 minutes to discuss travel industry in the new changing business environment. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacts the travel industry globally and in the region in 2020. The pandemic required many restrictions and lockdowns to limit people mobility. It caused weakened consumer demand and increased the cost for many businesses. And I will try to uncover emerging travel trends that market players should be aware of as they navigate in the new business environment. My name is Vitaly, and I represent the global research company Euromonitor International, where I work as a research manager, being responsible for the research of service and payments industries in Eastern Europe and Nordic countries. And a few words about our company. Euromonitor International, we are a service company that provides strategic and tactical market research about consumers globally. We have offices in 15 locations around the world with and over 1,000 on-the-ground researchers in 100 countries. And here is short agenda of my presentation. I will start from macroeconomic overview and then move to talking about travel industry, key travel trends, and we'll finish my presentation with the main takeaways. So here, let's start talking about macroeconomic situation globally. And on the graph, in the gray area, you can see our pre-COVID expectations from the global economy, and below for current scenarios. Uh, as of October, we consider baseline scenario to be the most probable one, when real GDP decline would reach almost 5% in 2020 and show a sharp recovery next year. However, the level of uncertainty facing the global economy remains really high, especially now with the huge second wave starting and a lot of restrictions coming into force. So pessimistic one scenario becomes more and more possible. And according to this scenario, real GDP decline will reach 5.3% this year, show small growth next year, and only then start its recovery. However, with possibility of new waves of the pandemic and delays in creation and distribution of vaccine, pessimistic 2 and pessimistic 3 scenario can be also possible with and based on these scenarios, recovery will take much longer and will be more like a U form rather than V. And if you look at the separate regions performance, Asia Pacific will show the fastest recovery. It will be led by Chinese economy that managed to withstood pandemic well compared to the most other countries. And but still, it still remains vulnerable to further significant pandemic waves, both domestically and globally, through the spillover effect of lower global trade. In terms of European countries, Eastern Europe is expected to perform somewhat better than Western European one. And in terms of Baltic Sea states, Iceland is expected to show the worst performance by posting -7 real GDP decline this year, being followed by Russia and Germany, each posting -6% decline. And among the better performing countries will be Lithuania with -2, Estonia -3, and Poland -4 real GDP decline this year. And now let's move to the travel industry overview. And before the COVID-19, the industry was really booming. Consumers demanded for new experiences, new emotions. They were preferring experiences rather than owning things. And as a result, travel industry exceeded 1.5 billion trips in 2019, with almost $2 trillion being spent while traveling. And the industry had really positive outlook. However, COVID-19 came, and without any discrimination, it affected all travel brands and destinations by having unprecedented global travel shutdown and different social lockdowns. And currently, we expect that in the best case scenario, number of world arrivals will decline by 60%, and in the worst case by 80% this year. And looking how currently things are evolving, as a result, closer to the worst case scenario can be more likely to happen. And then industry will take at least 3 years to recover to the pre-crisis level, and it will be recovery not only in terms of figures themselves, but also in how consumers understand traveling, how they feel safe to travel, and it will be a long process. And Baltic Sea states follow the same extremely negative global incoming flows dynamics this year, and every country will post at least 60% decline, with Russia showing the worst performance of 80% decline in terms of number of international arrivals. And the COVID-19 pandemic will take countries several years to recover from on the social, economical, and emotional front, and especially as new waves of the pandemic can happen. And already this summer, we could notice how the recovery can look like. From zero travel, people will start first exploring areas around their own communities. Then we'll start to travel domestically, and local domestic market will lead the way in the recovery. It will be play an important role to ensure that local communities see the value and they feel safe to travel. And only after this, people will start to explore neighboring countries, and as a last step, will go to the long haul destinations. And here are several examples how domestic tourism was developing in the region. As a first example, I put Hemisphere in Sweden, but uh, domestic tourism basically was developing rapidly in every single destinations in the region, and it resulted not only actually in booking travel accommodation, but also increased demand in buying summer properties. And another example comes from Lithuania, and it's called Collect Lithuania project. The project is already working for several years, and this summer it received extra boost. And it encourages tourists to visit all parts of the country to collect magnetic puzzle pieces to get the whole map of the country. And it's a great example how to motivate people travel not only to the most popular places but around the whole country, and how to redistribute tourism flows. And even from my personal example, I can say that my kids really like this program, and even 4 years old kid can name a small name of small towns in the country and tell you what to explore there. And the third example comes from Russia, where local authorities decided to promote both domestic tourism but also domestic payment card Mir by providing 20% cashback when domestic package tour is bought with a local payment card. And the program was also very successful, and now in autumn it starts its second round. And as I said, after domestic travel becomes well established, people will start exploring neighboring countries. And here is the case study of Baltic states travel bubble, the concept that was widely discussed in the global press, and the concept was very successful. And the success can be illustrated by for example, by the statistics of Latvian official accommodation that managed to generate almost 2 times bigger flows from tourists from Lithuania and Estonia compared to the last year. And similar travel bubbles are explored by other countries. For example, Singapore and Hong Kong currently are considering to launch this type of services this autumn. And just to sum up, of course, the whole industry suffered a lot, with no exception, this year, especially mass tourism, business tourism. Those segments of travel that felt somewhat better were everything connected to wellness tourism, visiting national park or other natural sites, and of course, all digital environment within the travel industry received extra boost. And now let's talk about key travel trends. Of course, this health crisis will likely accelerate some existing trends such as digitalization, automations, robotics, or virtual reality. And probably in spring and the beginning of summer, every single destination and quite many tourism attractions were inviting to different virtual tours and exhibitions. And I decided to illustrate this trend with the example coming from Faroe Islands, which allowed to remote control the local, giving commands by like jumping or running and exploring the area uh, with a GoPro. And people who are missing, and to in order to attract attention of people who are missing traveling, there are some other more niche concepts. For example, Finnair started to sell business class meals in local grocery stores. It like the concept wanted to meet two goals. First, to remind local tourists about the taste of traveling, and the second, to give some employment, some work to its employees. And of course, there were, especially in Asia, some more weird concept like providing opportunity to buy a flight to nowhere, so basically to start and finish the trip in the same airport. Of course, it had only very short-term success rather than long-term concept, but still it shows how companies were trying to get attention from consumers missing the traveling. And another concept that was really important in the industry prior to COVID-19 was sustainability. And if before the crisis it was positioning at the top of the agenda, focus on environmental problems, so the 2020 pandemic changed the situation, and based on the surveys that we conducted among companies, the agenda of sustainability is broadened to reflect the new social awareness, and companies and brands paying more attention to the employees, suppliers, local communities. But of course, uh, reducing impact on environment still uh, stays on the top. And yeah, in terms of our region, especially Nordic countries, leading the way by creating different applications to calculate travel footprints, or considering to launch night trains to close destinations instead of flying by planes, or working on the concept of electric planes like in Norway. And I decided to illustrate this trend by the concept coming from Germany, and representing uh, another heavily suffered industry of cruises. The application is called Miravanda, and basically this application calculates the carbon footprint and deducts the cost for offsetting from the commission. And now let's talk about another trend connected to online travel sales. And of course, there were already some permanent shifts in travel industry, uh, and the most important of which was a move to online. And already online sales generated more than half of all sales in travel modes, lodging, travel intermediaries, both globally and Europe. And yeah, unfortunately, online and mobile sales were not immune to the crisis, and they also recorded big losses. But still, bigger move and penetration of online sales will continue in the focused period, especially as more and more consumers are shifting towards uh, digital worlds. And if in the beginning the main focus of companies were to the oldest millennials and youngest Gen Xers, who are the most frequent e-commerce users, and they had more purchasing power. However, with the current restrictions, e-commerce in all spheres received extra boost, and more uh, different types of consumers came to the e-commerce, and will most likely stay there and increase also a number of of purchases. Of course, at this stage, it's more relevant for like e-commerce sales of goods, but it will for sure expand to all services, including travel, when all social distancing restrictions will be taken. And actually, we made this year a survey among businesses how they what they think about their customers' behavior. And one of the questions was, how do you think consumers will change their shopping behavior as a result of pandemic in terms of increased online shopping? And as you see, all type of businesses, including travel, say that they think that it is permanent change, that people are moving to online. And we also had another survey about consumers' behavior in terms of digital world and what factors influence them while they are online. And one of the questions was asked particularly about travel purchases, what factors drives it, and yeah, not surprisingly, the most important feature now is free cancellations, as possibility of free cancellations, as situations changes so drastically, and people wants to be sure that they can always cancel and refund their travel services. But after free cancellations follows all features connected to convenience, like easy navigation, fast speed, opportunity to pay with digital wallet. And now we came to the last part of my presentation. It's key takeaways in the survey among companies. We ask them how they see what do they see as the most important commerce specific developments for your organizations in coming 12 months. And travel companies, they, of course, one of the key answers they selected is connected to dealing with the COVID situations, advising and helping consumers. But still, the most popular answer was improving customer journey, integrating new technologies, creating new experience to be relevant, to be competitive in the business. It's really important. And yeah, COVID-19 changed and impacted economies, our life, how we live, how we work, how we shop, how we travel. And travel destinations and brands will have to do a lot of work to reassure visitors that their service or their destination is safe to travel. And in order to implement this, it's important to pay extra attention to the new technologies, to the digitalization, automation of the business. And of course, companies also need to remember about sustainability, and that all people also becomes important while talking about this subject. Thank you for your attention, and now I'm ready to answer your questions.
Vitaly, thank you for your presentation, for sharing your insights, and welcome to the conference. Can you hear us well?
Yes, I can hear you well. Hello, everyone.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that I would like to announce. So the first question, could you estimate the recovery of the Baltic Sea region?
Talking about recovery, it will be for sure not a short process. It will be a long way on all levels, starting from the government decisions, starting from companies' actions, starting with us consumers who definitely suffered with all pandemic effects, with all restrictions, suffered mentally, suffered at some extent financially. I think that in terms of tourism flows figures, it will take at least 3 years in most optimistic scenario to recover to 2019 level, but it will be definitely a long journey.
Okay, thank you. Another question, what advantages has the BSR region comparing to other regions to recovering faster?
I think that probably first of all we need to start from people. I think that in the region consumers are much more educated. They're much more responsible. So it means that it's easier to introduce different safety protocol, to introduce different measures that majority of population would follow. It's really a great advantage. Secondly, of course, it's I think that there are quite many. I mean, not talking about Russia's smaller countries where it's also easier to introduce and implement different strategies. So it's of course already experience in terms of tourism, already accumulated experience in terms of tourism development and well-established tourism products that has already its history, and where people from other regions has awareness of different travel products within the region. So it's all will benefit to recovery. But I said it's of course it will be a long journey, and there will be a lot of obstacles to handle.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia became famous for launching the Baltic travel bubble this summer, and it proved to be a major success for the tourism industry. What do you think? What kind of initiatives could all Baltic Sea region countries engaged in to promote tourism?
Okay, thank you for. It's a really good question, and yeah, definitely the Baltic countries travel bubble was definitely successful, and statistics illustrate this. But these countries are all from European Union and are relatively small by size, so it was quite not easy, but easier to introduce such kind of bubble. But looking at the whole region, where we have countries, for example, as Russia, where you need to have a visa regime, and it's obstacles that impossible to kind of to solve for in short time for easy traveling. So, and on the other hand, there is countries such as Sweden, which took its own way in handling pandemic situation. So, creating a single solution for the whole region, I think it would be quite difficult to implement. I would see rather cooperation of separate countries of the region.
One last question. So when do you think the second lockdown will be over and you and me can freely travel across Europe?
Well, I guess it's a question without exact answer. Yesterday there was a news about successful test of vaccine, and it's really great news, but there's a lot of uncertainty how the situation will evolve, how all restrictions measures regionally on the country level, on the global level will work. I hope that we already this summer have seen how the recovery can look like, and I hope that starting from the next summer, the travel market will start a steady recovery without new waves of the pandemic and new lockdowns.
Oh, and sorry, Vitaly, one more question. Jump
Sure.
in the last moment. Have you seen a significant rise in sustainable travel requests throughout the year 2020 that can really be linked to COVID-19 developments?
Well, I mean, sustainability, it's this question in travel and in general in all consumer related industries became like a topical already before the crisis, and especially in our region where especially Nordic countries were leading the way in the different sustainability kind of related concepts. And I gave several examples in my presentation. I think that with the pandemic, this this topic of sustainability will even get another boost and will be even more important. But of course, now it will be connected not only to the pollution of the earth, but also people will become in focus, and well-being of communities, of employees, of clients. All this will for sure will be in the agenda of companies and destinations.
Okay, thank you very much, Vitaly, for joining our forum and for contributing to it. We wish you a pleasant day, and you're welcome to stay online and listen to the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's introduce you the second speaker, Dr. Diana Šaparnienė, who is a professor of management at the University of Klaipėda in Lithuania. She's a researcher with interests in the fields of innovation leadership in tourism sector, development of health tourism, as well as accessible tourism and a new kind of tourism, e-tourism. She has published over 50 articles in national and international journals and serves as a member of editorial board for 2 scientific journals. In autumn 2020, an international research on youth awareness and attitudes towards the sustainable tourism and its development was completed, and Diana is here today to share some of the insights from the research. Her topic is Youth Networking for Sustainable Tourism Development in the Baltic Sea region. Please do not forget to ask questions, and please welcome Dr. Diana Šaparnienė.
Hello. Dear participants, I'll let you present our research on demand for the youth networking for sustainable tourism development in the Baltic Sea region. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced the tourism sector to shift towards sustainability, and our Baltic Sea region have great ambition to establish the whole region as a model of sustainable and prosperous region. And young people were seen as important actors and stakeholders in this case. I am glad to announce that the Council of the Baltic Sea States support one new project called Youth Networking for Sustainable Tourism Development in the Baltic Sea region. So, since the young people plays an important role in achieving sustainable tourism development goals, they need to see and feel the attractiveness of the region. They should take the responsibility of the tourism development in sustainable way, and of course to become a part of it. And networking could significantly contribute in joining young people to cooperate, share ideas, to encourage young people to be a part of sustainable tourism development processes. However, taking a case of our beautiful Baltic Sea region, there is a lack of data about their attitudes toward the sustainable tourism development, about their expression or behavior in sustainable tourism, and to identify the statistical types in general population regarding sustainability, in order to create network for all young people from Baltic Sea region. So, the aim of this presentation is to disclose the demand for the youth networking for sustainable tourism development in the Baltic Sea region based on cross-country research on the youth behavior and attitudes toward the sustainable tourism and its development. The research was carried out just last month in October, and the survey is still open. We are planning the last results of the research to present in the youth forum, which will be held in May of the next year. The total number of respondents at the moment is 965. Surveyed young people from the Baltic Sea countries, and majority of respondents, as you see, are from Latvia, Lithuania, and Russia. As we see, the females are dominating in the sample. This is corresponding to the trends in general, where in tourism sector, especially in tourism services area, dominating females. The age of the respondents ranges from 16 to 35, and majority of respondents are aged 16 to 25. More than half of the respondents have a university degree, about 50% are employed, and about 40% of respondents are students. And the survey sample include 32 and 6% of respondents directly working or studying in tourism-related area. The empirical part of the research is based on theoretical insights, and some already validated scales were used. One of such scales, the Sustainable Tourism Attitude Scale, named SUSTAS. For the research, it was chosen quantitative research strategy. We use internet survey method, and Mentimeter.com platform was as a tool for the survey. So the main results, key findings and conclusions. First of all, we explore the attitudes of young people towards sustainable tourism. As I mentioned, SUSTA scale was used to explore attitudes. In general, scale consists of 23 items. In order to construct subscales or factors, factor analysis was used, and by using the method of principal components and Wehrmacht's rotation, during the factorial analysis, 4 factors or subscales were extracted, and the statements in the factors were grouped very meaningfully. And how the factors were named, you can see the first factor, perceived economic and managerial benefit. This factor joins such statements as tourism development needs well-coordinated planning, the tourism industry should contribute economically to a country improvement, and etc. 12 statements joined first factor. A second factor was named perceived demand for environmental sustainability, and this factor joined, as you see, statements: our country diversity of nature is valued and protected by the tourism industry. Tourism in our country is improving the environment for future generation, and etc. Third factor named increased community participation and visitor satisfaction joined such statements as tourism decisions should be made by everyone equally. Country attractiveness is a core element of ecological appeal for visitors, and etc. And the fourth factor was named perceived social impact. The statements of this factor has more, as you see, negative direction, as tourists in our country disrupt my quality of life. My quality of life deteriorated because of tourism in our country, and etc. So there is a high correlation coefficients. This factor we obtained, as we see, correlation coefficient ranges from 0.5 to 0.8. Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin coefficient, which is very high, 0.91, explains the scale is applicable for factorial analysis. Also high Kronbach-Alpha coefficients is showing inner consistency of the factors. All these coefficients are showing high construct validity of the used scale. Searching for statistical types of youth by the attitudes towards sustainable tourism, the cluster analysis was made. As the number of the surveyed was considerably big, means cluster analysis was made. The structure of the clusters was reflected by breaks, as we see, by extracted 4 factors, And using cluster analysis, surveyed were typologized by tree cluster model, which is the most informative for interpretation by dynamics. Cluster 1, a blue one line, is the smallest group of the respondents, 4 and 4%. This group may be considered as taking up neutral or indifferent position towards sustainable tourism. All rates are clearly low. They are indifferent for the tourism policy benefit. They are quite neutral to environmental sustainability, economic, social benefit. These people find the sustainability idea too complicated, and they are too skeptic to sustainability in general. Cluster 2, orange one line, the biggest group of the respondents, 71.5%, may be named as a group of socioeconomic type. People of this type are forced on long-term regional economic well-being, which can be reached through effective management, planning, active society participation in tourism policy, implementation, where sustainable tourism development is seen as important social economic background. And cluster 3, gray one column, the line, this cluster can be named as a balanced type. 23 and 4% of the respondents belong to this type. All rates, as you see, are above average, and this type tries to find a balance between dimensions, all dimensions of sustainable tourism. So the results of this cluster analysis are showing quite positive situation in youth population structure regarding attitudes towards sustainable tourism. But what is in reality how respondents are in general sustainable? It was a presented question, how I am sustainable? 19 questions in the scale, or 19 items measures expression of sustainability. And during factorial analysis from 19 items were extracted as well for factors. First factor, as you see, was named sustainable shopping, and joint statement, when I buy clothes, I consciously select those which are marked as environmentally friendly. I bought consciously bio products, and etc. Second factor, sustainable behavior with equipment, joint statements as I consciously adjust my heater on lower level. I consciously switch off my electronic devices if do not use them for longer time, and etc. Third factor was named thrifty usage of resources, and joint statements as if possible, I buy my clothes in second hand, I repair or let my electronic device repair rather than buying new ones. And factor 4 belong to sustainable traveling. And using cluster analysis, surveyed were once again typologized by G-cluster model, where cluster 1, blue one line, type of expressed sustainability. Almost 20% respondents belong to this type, and people of this type are sustainable in all main areas. They try to keep water resources, electricity, try to be sustainable in shopping, traveling, using equipment, and etc. Cluster 2, orange one line, type oriented toward sustainable behavior. Almost half of youth belong to this type. It can be seen that people of this type are more in neutral position regarding sustainable traveling. They are not very thrifty in shopping, but like to buy more sustainable goods. Mainly, they pay attention to sustainable behavior with equipment. They keep electricity, heater, keep energy. Is it not used at that moment? And cluster 3, gray one color, it's about 31% of respondents. We named this cluster as well indifferent for sustainability type, as we saw in attitudes towards sustainable tourism scale. Indifferent for sustainability group was very small, 4.4%. In this expression of sustainability group, is 31% of respondents are indifferent for sustainability. So summarizing, we can state that using cluster analysis, extracted statistical types of youth toward sustainability or attitudes toward sustainable tourism are essential information which provides us opportunity in tourism policy, focus not on abstract or faceless young people, but on very definite and really existing types of youth in the region. Also, we were asking which way and which kind of tourism mostly like young people. As you can see in graphical analysis, almost 65% of them like to travel in a sustainable way. And the most popular kinds of tourism between young people in Baltic Sea region are cultural tourism, family and eco or nature tourism. Medical tourism, business and culinary tourism is not so favored between our young people. Where young people are seeing challenges in sustainable tourism, it was done rank. In the first place, it is seen problems with increasing waste, especially due to the COVID pandemic situation. We know that increased single-use plastics as masks, as gloves, air pollution, climate changes, and etc. As we see, environmental dimension is seen as requiring the most decisions to solve. And how to overcome challenges, according to the respondents, first of all should be well-organized waste management, local policies, safe accessibility of tourism objects, what is especially important in current situation, control of visitors' numbers, and visit objects for shorter time. Summarizing, we can state that the opinion, ideas, solutions, and initiatives of young people regarding sustainable tourism are very important and are welcome, and they could be developed and shared in our new international networks, TENETI, which also aiming to increase young people capacity in sustainable tourism development, to raise young people awareness of sustainability, and also we are aiming that this network will help to create tourism vision 2030 for Baltic Sea region. So we inviting all young people to join our network, but to present deeply the network or just sanity platform in which we will develop idea of networking, I would like to invite Mangirdas Matusevičius, one of the creator of the platform. So thank you very much. And Mangirdas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, I am Mangirdas from Rondo Agency. We have developed Stand.y platform. The main focus of the system is idea sharing, that all members can share, discuss, and evaluate them. 3 simple steps how to do so. First of all, you need to become a member. After filling the form, you will get confirmation email. After clicking the link, you will be able to join the platform. In the e-box, you will find main topics under which you can provide your idea or discuss other ideas. If you want to provide yours, click Submit New Idea. Fill the form, and afterwards, the platform admin will confirm it. Check other ideas, read all the material, have discussions in the comment section, and vote for the best ones. As a member, you will be able to join the workshops. In the workshop field, you will find gathered ideas, and you can provide your idea. So join the network now at stand.y.com and provide best ideas.
Diana, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for joining us today. Can you hear us well?
Yes, I hear.
A little note to the viewers and participants. Thank you for being active in the question section. It would be amazing if you could also use the little box to type in your name and country, because now most of the questions are anonymous, and it would be amazing to put a name to those questions. So, Diana, first question. How many people in your survey used sustainable tourism tours and products?
Thank you for the question. Exactly, we were asking our respondents how they are sustainable, how I am sustainable. It was a group of questions. And the first one question exactly and was how you are sustainable. And from our research, we can state that about 25% of the respondents, they think that they are sustainable, but they are not very active in this area, and mainly about half of respondents, 55%, state that they are quite active in sustainability area, in sustainable tourism area. They are quite active in different sustainable tourism dimensions, and the first one dimension was mentioned as environmental dimension. They are very active in keeping energy, keeping water, keeping heating if it's not necessary. The second one dimensions, what was mentioned, it was social and economic, and these dimensions were more or less in equal evaluation. I think that about 50, about half of our respondents are really sustainable and try to be sustainable.
Did you also get any information on what would be needed to increase the number of people really living and traveling in a sustainable way? Do you have to make it more visible for them, easy accessible, or what?
Sure. If we want to have more people, more young people who can be active in traveling, in sustainable traveling, of course, we can to pay big attention for the awareness towards sustainability, towards sustainable tourism at this moment. Of course, we can to pay attention how to give more knowledge and capacity, how to increase capacity building in sustainability. And of course, it's depend on our country's policy, how we can work together toward the sustainable way.
Thank you. Where did you find the biggest and most statistically significant differences in answers when analyzing research results by countries? In other words, what are the biggest differences between the countries?
Yeah, not really. I would like to say that in general, research results did not show very big and significant differences between countries in answers. Mostly people, young people from all surveyed countries are equal, familiar with understanding, expression, attitude towards sustainable tourism. But of course, there were some differences. For example, the same question, how I am sustainable? Answering to this question, young people from Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in the first position marked that they try not to buy plastic bags when they are shopping. So it was some specific from Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and of course, we can maybe state that for these results could be country's policy added some impact. Where stories in these countries we know that will not longer provide plastic bags free of charge. So maybe it can be as a reason. But in general, in all countries, as I already mentioned, research results did not show big and significant differences between respondents, just in some cases, not so very big differences.
You were asking your respondents about their attitudes towards sustainable tourism, but do they actually understand what it means? Do they understand what sustainable tourism is?
Yes, thanks for question. Exactly, the first group of the questions were called the understanding of the concept of sustainable tourism, and there were several questions. Do you believe that you understand the concept of sustainable tourism? And talking about the results, according to answers, as I already mentioned, about half of them think that they are knowing something but needs more information about, and about 20% of respondents do not have any understanding about sustainable tourism. But generalizing, we can state that understanding of sustainable tourism concept in youth population is moderate at this moment and still lack of attention. So we are aiming in our STENIT platform, in our STENIT network, to pay attention to all of these issues.
Johannes is wondering, why did you choose exactly these 5 countries in your research? Why did you exclude some of the countries around the Baltic Sea?
So first of all, this research was done in the context of the project, and as countries, partners in our project are countries from these countries. So it was at this moment such decision. But in future, I think we will have to expand the research area.
And the last question, it's very down to earth. What is your recommendation? Tourism businesses have no income for 8 months. How do you recommend to develop sustainable tourism products if businesses have no money?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question in reality, how to solve this situation. But in my opinion, first of all, should we pay bigger attention to partnership, cooperation between sectors, between private sector, public sector, and NGOs and citizens, and together find some decisions how we can to move our tourism toward. There are a lot of new ideas, new initiatives, new innovations could be created. Just we should to talk together, to have some cooperation, and I hope we will we will develop our tourism in sustainable way. And young people, of course, are number one. And I would like to ask all of them to join our network, and together we can to do a lot.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for sharing the research, and thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you very much.
This was Dr. Diana Šoparnienė. We thank her again. And I would like to invite our next speaker, who is Professor Stefan Gösling. He is Professor of Tourism at Linnéa University School of Business and Economics in Kalmar, Sweden. Stefan has studied interrelationships of tourism, transport, and sustainability for over a quarter of a century. In the early 1990s, his work focused on aviation and the sector's contribution to the emission of greenhouse gases. Since then, he has started to investigate a wide range of different transport modes, including the car, bicycle, and e-scooter. He is specifically interested in climate policy and transport governance, the digitalization of tourism and transport economics, urban planning, and social norm change in consumer culture. His ambition is to contribute to basic and applied science with the overall objective to develop solutions for a growing number of environmental problems. His topic today is how COVID-19 could change mobility. Please welcome Professor Stefan Gösling.
Good day, everyone. My name is Stefan Gösling. I'm grateful for being here today and having the opportunity to talk a little bit about Corona and how Corona could change tourism mobility. You will have noted the could. We don't know much, but I'm here to do a bit of speculation. I thought we should start with discussing how the whole thing came into existence. If you remember, it all went very quickly within a few weeks, starting the 15th of January, quite early, out of China. Through air travel, the virus spread globally. And obviously, this tells us something about the risks that air travel implies for global pathogen distribution, and also what that means in terms of the tourism system's resilience. We've been reminded of that. And I think it's very important that we don't forget this won't be the last time we'll see viruses spread throughout the world. The impacts of the virus spreading have been felt immediately. If you remember, there wasn't much travel up to the summer when new infection rates came down a little bit. In some parts of Europe, you could travel again. But for most people, travel decisions had already been made earlier than that. So it didn't mean that there was a recovery in many countries, rather than a severe loss for most that had hoped for more summer tourism. And the situation right now is, as you know, quite bad as well. All of the world is again in lockdown with very few exceptions. So we have a very severe situation at the moment. The economic outlook is recession for the world, about 5% for this year is the projection by some think tanks. We'll see what happens, but I think what we can expect that there won't be any normalcy in travel before the next summer, and even then there will still be implications from the crisis. I was asked to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has changed mobilities. I'm using the term mobilities here, which refers to a little bit more than just transport of people. I'm talking a little bit about what we call corporeal mobility, that is the transport of people, and how that has affected the different transport modes. I'm not so much talking about virtual mobility. We've seen people using a lot more ICT in order to travel and to see the world through the eyes of others, potentially prior to the crisis, and in terms of recorded travel. And then we also have a great increase in imaginative mobility, the longing to holiday, where people already talk about what they will do once the crisis is over. We also have seen a major increase in other forms of transportation that is mostly freight. People have ordered a lot more than earlier on through the internet because of the crisis, and this has actually affected air transport, where we've seen a major uptake in freight globally. This is actually what you can see here. It's a bit of a snapshot on air transport. Look at the two bluish columns to the left. Passenger transport is down 80% as of the second quarter of 2020, while freight has increased by almost 20%. And I think it's fair to say that business travel has come down significantly. And there's a major move towards video conferences. I'm not thinking that this will change again, rather than people will make that a pattern in the future. Companies have understood that they can probably be far more productive if employees travel less. And hence, I think with the cost argument also being important, that we'll see a lot less business travel in the future. With regard to leisure travel, I think that it's fair to say that for a year or two, leisure travel will be characterized by fears. So people will avoid long distance travel and probably try to holiday closer to home. And the strongest rebound in global tourism we'll probably see for the visiting friends and relative sector, because that is something that is very important for people to see their next to kin. And that means that we'll probably see a rebound there quite early and quickly. When it comes to surface-bound transport, we've also seen a very strong focus on the car as the major transport mode, and that will also probably stay for some time. It's a bit problematic, Ben, because if you think about the car, we have earlier on tried to avoid that car growth continues, because many cities are already clogged and it's very difficult to accommodate more cars. So that was seen critically before the pandemic. But now driving is legitimate because of safety concerns, and that probably will have repercussions for quite a long time into the future. We've also seen a major rise in mobile homes with all that implies for destinations. I'm also thinking this will stay with us for some time. And obviously this does not necessarily mean that it's a good development from a tourism sustainability viewpoint. Public transport is characterized by fear at this point. It's highly problematic because prior to the pandemic, if you remember, we wanted that more people use trains, for example, to move about. And there is now something what we call reinforcement of negative affective environments. Public transport often has been problematic to travel in prior to the pandemic. With the pandemic, these notions have been reinforced. And obviously there's a negative feedback loop. If fewer people use public transport, then it's less viable to have public transport. So the system is quite affected by the pandemic. On the positive side, perhaps we've seen a major increase in the interest in cycling and also in walking, which could be quite positive for cities, because if you think about city centers where people like to cycle and walk, this is perfect in terms of perceived safety and quality of life if we get to get more people to use bicycles or to walk instead of driving. But not everybody is happy about the developments here. As you know, in some countries, automobile lobbies have already started court proceedings in order to get rid of the few pop-up bike lanes that we've seen in cities. It's been, in my opinion, an opportunity, or would have been an opportunity, to actually get more people to cycle and to walk because of the pandemic. And it's not too late to still make use of that. And then obviously from here to the bigger picture, if you think 2018, we've been not talking about under-tourism, as now we have been talking about over-tourism. And now we've seen that there's problems in the systems that are related to the distribution of tourism. We have some very important generating countries like Germany or the UK, and then of course the importing countries that have been losing on the crisis. And in this situation, I think it's quite interesting or important to actually rediscuss how we want destinations to develop in the future. And for the second half of my presentation today, I thought I should make some comments on this. So what we knew prior to the pandemic is that this tourism system as it wasn't really sustainable. Actually, we had major problems prior to the pandemic that should have been resolved. Air transportation, for example, has been suffering from overcapacities and poor economics. I'll talk about that in a second. And destinations have largely focused on volume growth with very small profit margins. And I think that then brings me to the question of how COVID should also be seen as an analog to climate change. And here you see a world map that is colored from blue to red. Red is bad and blue is good, if you want. It's a depiction of the global tourism system as it would develop under climate change if we don't engage in mitigation. What you can see here is essentially that because of climate change, most destinations in the world, particularly in poor countries, will suffer very badly, and tourism will no longer be viable in these countries. This is actually a very complex exercise based on 27 indicators that we did 2 years ago. But in Europe, we still have good potential for tourism, and that to me is an important reason to think about how we should design our tourism systems to make them more resilient for the future. Coincidentally, we talked about this in a publication, The Low Carbon Imperative, Destination Management Under Urgent Climate Change, that was published just a few months ago. And here we talked about how destinations should design their systems in order to meet the challenges of climate change. But I think it's also a way of meeting the challenges of COVID-19. And essentially what we want is for these destinations to focus on a high-value, low-carbon, resilient tourism model, where you reduce leakage, where you lower the carbon emissions that are associated with tourism, and where you add value to the destination through different strategies. And let me talk a little bit about what this might mean. If you think about COVID as an opportunity rather than something that is currently affecting tourism negatively, I think we want a greater share of domestic tourism, as we've also seen this year. I think we can do with a lot less air transport because the overcapacities have led to very small profit margins, and we probably also need to discuss the perspectives on profitability and leakage I discussed earlier on. So here's some specific advice on how that might look. The map you can see here is a European map of Booking.com listed establishments and also Airbnb. And also what we know from this study that we recently prepared for the European Parliament is that there's a lot of accommodation capacity in Europe because of the recent disruptions that have happened on account of, for instance, Airbnb. So we have volume growth as the main principle in many destinations that has also led to more price competition and then to a declining revenue and most importantly, profitability. So we need to address this kind of development. In air transportation, this is probably the most crucial issue. What you can see here in this graph is the net profit per departing passenger for the past 20 years. And you can see that in 12 years in total, the average amount of money that has been earned on each passenger has been negative. So in other words, for 15 years out of these 20 airlines have lost money on transporting people. And over the last 5 years, the overall trend has been one that is negative, where the average profit margin has declined. And this, I think, is characterizing air transport, because if you think about COVID and what it will do to the sector in the near future, you can see in this graph that industry anticipates that for at least this and next year, there will be a continued cash burn in terms of money lost. And this needs to be seen in light of the many subsidies forwarded to the aviation sector, probably just in terms of not paid carbon taxes, if you think climate change and negative externalities, something in the order of $100 billion per year. And then we know that another $100 billion have been paid to the sector in state aid just until May 2020 this year. So overall, the sector only works because of the many subsidies forwarded to the sector, which then has led to the decline in the average cost of travel, minus 60% over the last 20 years, which then explains the low profitability. So can we think this sector differently is my question. We need to talk about developments in average length of stay, also something we have studied. Over the past 20 years, we've seen a 14% decline in average length of stay for the 40 largest tourism economies in the world. And I think we need to remember that when people stay longer, they will also be willing to use slower transport modes, which is then more environmentally beneficial and then helps destinations to capture more money through people staying longer periods of time. We have been focusing in Europe on long distance markets, believing that people from other parts of the world will spend more money. This is partially true, but there's also a myth here because people staying for longer periods of time usually distribute their stay within different European countries, which then means that each country can capture quite a little bit of the return from these people. So I think there's a strong argument, even economically, to no longer consider the distant markets as the most beneficial. We should really think closer markets in the future. And then finally, we've been talking quite a bit about climate change early on, and usually the notion is that climate change is too costly. We can't do something about climate change because there's no money. But on the other hand, if you think about the vast amounts of money that are forwarded quite generously to the platform economy, 18 to 20% of turnover, then I think we can reconsider whether spending an extra euro per bed night for climate change mitigation purposes is really a lot of money. So in other words, I'm really questioning the role and functioning of the platform economy. We all seem to think we are depending on these platforms, but I'm not really necessarily sure this is the case. I think we should question whether this business model is actually one that is good for destinations or whether it just implies a lot of leakage. To conclude this little presentation, I think the longer term outlook is that risk perceptions have changed. We have seen a growth in risk perceptions and fears related to travel and other issues. And these risks will remain with people for a long time. I think it's fair to say the distance will be associated with danger for at least 2-3 years to come. So it's a very good position in order to develop closer markets and to also try to focus on slower modes of transport in order to bring tourists to the different destinations. Also, please consider the overall development in the world where Europe is increasingly becoming the last safe haven. We are the region that provides more safety to our visitors than most other parts of the world. And this should be a very strong argument for us to consider the fact that we can choose the types of tourists that we want, because demand is growing rapidly, and this will continue to be the case in the future. So I think we should really not just see the transport question as one where we passively stand by and look at developments, rather than where we think about how we want people to travel and how we can make that happen. There's a lot of opportunities in the current situation. I'm not seeing COVID-19 only negatively. I would hope that all of you can engage in debates on how we can make the most of tourism in the Baltic region in the future. Thank you so much.
Stefan, thank you very much for sharing your insights on mobility, and welcome to the live Q&A session. Can you hear us well?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, we have quite a number of questions to go through, so I'll jump straight into them. And the first question is, which mode of transport will be the most popular in the Baltic Sea region comparing to other regions?
Well, I think it very much depends on what you want politically. Transport systems are not a given. They can be developed in very different directions. And as you know, we have had a major push towards more air transport in the past. This is problematic for reasons of climate change, but even in terms of airport capacity and expansion needs and related problems to noise and air pollution locally. So I think I would be very much in favor for an expansion of railway systems.
You mentioned railway, so I'll ask a few questions in relation to railways. Do you think Rail Baltica, linking Helsinki to Berlin, should be prioritized by the Baltic states' governments and the European Commission, or this project is destined to fail and should be stopped immediately?
That is a political question, and unfortunately, I'm just a scientist. I obviously think we should invest more in high-speed rail systems. Also, I might want to remind you that we have quite interesting developments elsewhere. If you think about the Hyperloop that apparently makes progress, I think railway systems have great potential still, and it should definitely be considered closely.
What is your impression? Will we travel less in the future or just stay closer?
Well, it's hard to say. The world has been developing in a direction that I think has been quite problematic. We have seen greater levels of fear characterizing transport systems, not just because of the COVID pandemic, also because of refugees and migration and so on. And all of this has made the world a less secure place. I could imagine that this limits our interest in global travel in the future if this trend continues. Then, on the other hand, people have always been interested in seeing other cultures, seeing other places, and I would think that our interest will not change. The question is how we will travel, how long we will stay. But Europe definitely probably is becoming a more important destination in the future.
And do you think, a similar question, do you think online traveling or augmented reality could replace the physical traveling that we're used to?
No, not really. If you remember, on social media, much competition is on visiting places, communicating travel. I'm not seeing that go away very quickly. Probably will stay for us for considerable time. Even young people will want to study abroad for periods of time. I don't see really how virtual travel could replace that. And augmented reality is only just useful mostly for museums, attractions, events to get additional information. So I'm not really thinking real physical travel will see a decline in interest.
A small reminder to the spectators that when you ask the questions, please type in your name. It's much nicer not to see the anonymous, but the real name, if you may. One more question. Do you see specific differences regarding future of mobility behavior in different countries of the Baltic Sea region? Are there any differences between the countries?
I've never studied this, so this is gut feeling. Obviously, there are differences. I think in some countries it's more institutionalized. For instance, for younger people to stay for a year or an extended period of time in another country as predominantly to learn another language. And I think this could develop throughout the Baltic Sea region, possibly. Then I don't think there is a general difference in terms of people's interest in travel. It's more limited in some countries at the moment due to economic restrictions, perhaps, and the financial means that people have to travel. But I'm not thinking there's a general difference within the European Union. It's totally different if you look into the United States, for instance, where just a minor share of people even has a passport to travel abroad. I think the European Union is probably more unified and homogeneous in that respect.
You did talk in your presentation about Airbnb and Booking. And you said we shouldn't focus on them. What do you, in the future, what do you think, in which direction is the travel economy then taking in this regard? In other words, what will replace those platforms?
Well, in theory, it would be very easy to have our own European platform that we manage ourselves, that is run by a European company, that takes a far lower share of commissions, that is influenced by the wishes of the member states. And my general question mark is, with the main intention that is behind destination development to increase turnover and profitability and the importance of tourism for countries, then why do we just look on as 20% of the turnover is disappearing out of Europe towards the United States? So I'm a strong advocate of rethinking the platform economy and building our own systems.
Another similar question on the topic, you mentioned that those platforms are not sustainable. Isn't it so that it gives the opportunity for private people to be included in the business and take their share? Otherwise, they wouldn't have a chance to give or promote their services. What do you think about that?
I think I made the point in my presentation that the only point where I actually see a benefit of the platform economy is the empowerment of SMEs, of small and medium enterprises. So I totally agree with this viewpoint, but a European platform would serve the same purpose. And that then obviously we need a marketing and reservations platform, but let's make one of our own, is my suggestion, perhaps.
What do you think about the initiative of the European Commission to encourage young people to travel around Europe by train?
I think it's brilliant. If you've ever done that yourself, you will know that there is so much to learn, so many people to meet, so many experiences to be had, and all in very environmentally friendly ways that really broaden your horizons sustainably. I can only recommend it. I think it's a great initiative.
Marissa is asking, do you think we should expect a wave of airline bankruptcies in the near future?
Probably yes. I mean, Norwegian is on the brink right now. The question is, how much more money do states want to invest in airlines when we should know that there's overcapacity, has been overcapacity built up over decades, really. I think it would actually be good for the market if some airlines disappeared, simply because then the profitability of the remaining airlines would vastly improve. We have too much capacity in the market. And usually, if market forces are let to prevail, this should resolve itself as a problem. But I think, yes, probably, if not governments decide otherwise, expect more airlines to go bankrupt.
Do you think the cheap airlines or the more traditional ones have a better chance of surviving the pandemic?
Well, it's a question of cross subsidies that have been forwarded also to a lot of the low-cost carriers. I mean, some of the low-cost carriers fly people at a price that is lower than the cost of the fuel for transporting the person. Obviously, market-based rules do not apply. And unfortunately, many of the scheduled carriers have a more difficult market position because they also serve public service obligations and so on. And that makes them, with often elderly aircraft that consume more fuel, more vulnerable to market changes. And I'm not sure what that really means for each and every airline, but yes, there's complications here, definitely.
What do you think about the perspectives of cross-border projects in Baltic region that include also Russian Federation?
Well, we need to build a world that comes together. Probably we've all been watching events in North America, and we probably all welcome an America that is more open again towards cooperation. We cannot become a world that's xenophobic in its roots. And while I strongly recommend that the European Union develop their own projects, I don't think there's any space for excluding other countries in cooperation. We should see cooperation wherever we can. It's what humans do best, actually, cooperate.
Agne is wondering, do you think protected areas have a greater advantage in the tourism sector during the pandemic?
Advantage and disadvantage. Obviously, we've seen a major interest in being outdoors, in visiting protected areas, and this has led to increasing pressure on many areas, and that needs to be managed probably in many cases. I think it's too early to say what the outcomes will be, but I think the general interest in being outdoors, doing things in natural areas, protected areas, has increased, and this interest is probably here to stay. So probably there's ample reason to have a good look at what's happening in protected sites to make sure there is not too much pressure.
Okay, and probably the final question, someone is saying that they're happy to see you, Professor, and writing that a lot of your research topics were related with limited capacity of nature reserves, destinations, or etc. Now we have it by nature or force majeure. Please let us know what further research gaps you are planning to analyze in the next 2 years.
Oh boy, that's a big one. Quick answer. Research gaps emerge all the time. I've recently focused a lot on policy because I would think that we need more governance in the future. We're not going to see change through consumer choices. The mechanisms that are at work are too powerful. And specifically, the information and communication technology revolution has meant that a lot of new processes, such as the interest to post travel on social media, has increased. We need governance structures that shape rules that secure a common future, specifically with regard to climate change, because climate change is unfortunately still underestimated by too many people in terms of what it will imply. And that inspires much of my research right now to make propositions for the types of policy that could implement these changes.
I lied about that being the last question. This might be the last question. Dear Professor, the question comes from Lina Nosovic from the National Association of Medical Spas. What will be the role of health tourism in the future?
Well, for any society, I think it's true that once you have achieved a certain level of wealth, you will be much concerned with your personal health. And I would think that this is going to continue. People will place a great interest in personal health, which opens up for fantastic opportunities for tourism, not just in terms of spas, but even in terms of offering active activities where people can cycle, walk, and so on. But even in terms of food, where there's a great interest now in, for instance, vegetarian choices, where people are really interested in experimenting. And all of this should be very positive for us because we see that these personal interests can be used at the destination level to create new products and greater interest in destinations.
Professor Stefan, thank you so much for your presentation and also for your insights and answers to the question. It was lovely having you here.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
have a good one as well. The Baltic travel bubble is not the only initiative that became famous around the world. 3 decades ago, the people from Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia joined hands and formed a human chain connecting the 3 Baltic capitals, from Vilnius to Riga to Tallinn. It was a mobility nightmare and also a cooperation nightmare. And the pandemic is not the worst, probably not the worst thing we've seen in our history and in our lifetimes. And despite the fact that we had much less means of communication, of transportation, back in 3 decades ago, we still managed to organize such a huge event. I was around 6 months old back then, and my family was traveling, 8 of us, I think, in one single car. And mobility obstacles were defeated. And in that spirit of cooperation and mobility, we would like to remind this little piece, but important piece of history called the Baltic Way. Please enjoy.
Jas slegia pančiai neviltis, vajoja lyg elgeta pajūriu, dvasia tautų garbės. Bet varpas likimo nuaidi vėl, jūra šiaušia bangas. Tai sesės iš miego kyla jau apginti savo garbės.
It is wonderful to relive those amazing memories from 3 decades ago. And for the last time, I will ask you to be active in the question section. Don't forget to write your names as well as the country you come from. And I would like to present our final speaker, Ms. Lublana Dimova, who is a research project manager at European Travel Commission. Graduated in 2015 in tourism management and hospitality, both from University of Central Florida and University Institute of Lisbon. Ms. Dimova has since been working at the European Travel Commission as part of the research and development team. Her main responsibilities include continuous monitoring of trends in the European tourism sector and short-term forecasting of travel demand from key overseas markets, as well as her constant communication with destination management organizations. She is in charge of the development of ETC's Executive Dashboard, a data hub that provides simple access to key indicators and market intelligence information for the travel and tourism industry in Europe. The topic of her presentation for today is understanding Generation Z travelers and their preferences in the context of COVID-19. Please welcome Lublana Dimova.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lublana Dimova. I'm research manager at the European Travel Commission, and I'm very pleased to be part of this event that it's at once very exciting and also very relevant. For those of you who don't know us, the European Travel Commission is a non-profit organization that's responsible for the promotion of European local source markets. Our members are the 33 national tourism organizations across Europe, and our mission is to strengthen the sustainable development of the region as a tourism destination and to increase its competitiveness through a variety of activities, among which are marketing, advocacy, an extensive generation of market intelligence, and much more. I'm not going to bother you with more information because you can find everything on our corporate website. Now, today we are going to talk about Generation Z, the next big generation of consumers. And before I start, I just like to clarify that when I'm talking about Generation Z today, I'll be referring to all these individuals that are born between 1996 and 2012, which means that as of this year, we have a generation that consists of children, teenagers, and students and young professionals. This is very important to keep in mind, especially when conducting, for instance, an in-depth market research or developing products and experiences for Generation Zers, as the individuals within these little subgroups might exhibit quite different consumer preferences at the different stages of their growth. And this is especially before they reach the age of 30. Something else that I'd like to clarify as well is why we should really start thinking, talking, and understanding this generation. So as you may already know, the Generation Z is overtaking the millennials and is slowly becoming the most populous generation on Earth. The same demographic structure also suggests that as the members of this generation reach adulthood, the major consumer growth, including demand for tourism, is expected to come from regions like Africa, like Latin America, like Southeast Asia, where the youthful population is the largest. And this would definitely trigger the need for developing new products, expanding international cooperations, and also expanding our own knowledge about the consumers from these new markets. Another reason for learning more about this generation is their unique outlook of the world. As for any other generation, the generations that beliefs and behaviors are shaped by the context of the times they grew up in. And here I've selected a few of the major issues that have grown in importance since the start of 21st century and that have definitely impacted on Generation Z's personas. So you can see here, for instance, the globalization, the 2008 financial crisis, terrorism and climate change. In addition, they are also growing up in an era of unique awareness about human behavior, personal health, technology, the impact of people and environment, etc. And as you can imagine, all of these external forces that other generations witnessed but did not grow up with have led to the formation of a very, very unique consumer features and a generation that is likely to drive change, not only in tourism, but also in many other areas of life. So let's have a look now at a few interesting consumer trends that are very good to understand and consider whether you're representing the tourism industry or any other consumer-related business. And in fact, it's also very important to stress that these consumer trends are not triggered by COVID-19. They're deeply rooted in Generation Z's behavior. They were there before COVID-19, and they are likely to be also very apparent after COVID-19. So first, the climate change and sustainability are very important for 1 in 3 Generation Zers, and they closely follow this topic on all channels that they have access to. Because of activists like Greta Thunberg, for instance, which is also part of this generation, millions of young people have been inspired to take actions on climate change and mitigate their own impact on the environment whenever possible. In practice, this suggests that from now on, tourism stakeholders should constantly highlight their efforts to fight climate change, improve sustainability, and demonstrate that these issues are being taken very seriously. One insight that we actually got from one of our researchers on Generation Z is that the consumers of these generations are quite interested in eco-friendly brands and products that were sourced locally because they really like to reduce their negative impact on the environment. They also like to support the local community. And this basically suggests that these are the key elements that we should highlight in our communication with Generation Z consumers. Another important feature of Generation Zers is that they're the most diverse and open generation in the history so far. And when you have a consumer group that grows in such a diverse environment, the members of this group are usually quite curious about their cultural roots, and they're also interested in different cultures and countries. And I'm mentioning this because such kind of interest and behavior can easily drive further demand for international foods, international drinks, cultural exchange, and so on. Other important aspects that are crucial for this generation in this context are the tolerance, the inclusiveness, the openness, and the freedom of expression. The majority of Generation Zers believe that racial and ethnic diversity is very positive for our society. And so here, from a practical point of view, we should remember that we're talking about a generation which is far more accepting of social and ethnic minorities, and that destinations that are openly celebrating diversity in all forms are likely to gain gain the approval of Generation Zers. Of course, the open approach should not only be limited to marketing communication, but also through trainings and education with tourism businesses too. Another important feature of Generation Zers is that, that more than any other generation before them, they care strongly about their physical and mental health. And in fact, besides everything else that internet today provides, they're really keen on using internet to gain knowledge about a healthy life, and this knowledge actually creates a lot of movements in this direction, which have highly influenced the Generation Z's behaviors. And just to give you an example, in contrast to the common perceptions that young people like to consume alcohol, some recent research again on Generation Z disclosed that the members of this young generation are way less interested in consuming alcohol and other harming products compared to their older counterparts, the millennials and the baby boomers. They also appear to invest a lot of to invest in a lot of products that relate to self-care, such as healthy foods, beauty, skincare products, and gym membership. And to address this consumer need, tourism stakeholders could promote products and other experiences that are more enriching for the body and for the mind, and demonstrating that a visit to their destination or consumption of an experience or product will leave a generation Zers all around better people. I mentioned internet early, and here is the place to say that Generation Z is the first generation that embraced technology from a very early age, and the majority of them are constantly online and do actually feel more insecure without their mobile phones than without their wallets. It will also be accurate to actually say that this is the generation of consumer that spends on average the longest time per day on their mobile devices. And here, in terms of recommendations for the industry, what we can say is that tourism businesses that do not have an online presence or are difficult to find and interact with cannot be considered relevant. So tourism providers must continually adapt to ensure that they are searchable with devices and the channels that Generation Zers are using. Another important point here is that as a result of the developing technologies and the increasing requirements of consumers, Generation Zers expect their relationships with brands to be on a peer-to-peer basis rather than just receiving a flow of content from one source in one direction. Another implication of such hyper-connectedness is the widespread awareness of privacy and data security, and since Generation Zers are being raised in the era of fake news and misinformation, trust and authenticity are essential for them. That's why as consumers they often tend to research products and experiences extensively before they purchase it, and this makes them a segment that is starting to hold companies to a higher extent of accountability. Another concern for Generation Z consumers is also how brands are using their personal data to target them with advertisements. So our recommendation here is that businesses should be clear and honest around pricing and the use of personal data, because hazy pricing, hidden costs, unethical or opportunistic selling may be quickly called out through social media channels and create reputational damages that are very difficult to repair. So these were some of the general consumer trends that I find very relevant and important to consider when working for the attraction of members of this generation. And we also expect these consumer trends to actually evolve in the near future. Now, in the next part of my presentation, I would like to share with you some of the short-term expectation of Generation Zers regarding travel, their travel intentions, their travel preferences, their fears related to travel, and so on. The results that I'll present are part of a project which monitors the intention for intra-European travel of people from the 10 highest source markets in Europe. Here I extracted, of course, the information that specifically refers to Generation Zers, and I hope you find it very interesting. So we start with the intention of Generation Zers to travel in the next 6 months, which covers the period October 20, April 2021. As you can see, we have a very, very big split between the different categories, and actually those that are the strongest, the most polar ones, very unlikely and very likely are at the same level, which basically talks about uncertainty about the future travel. We have also a good amount of respondents saying that they're unlikely to travel or they have no idea yet. So although this is not the most positive outlook, it is still very important to understand what are the attitudes of the youngest travelers, at least in the short term. So here we were interested to understand what was what was concerning them, what are their main fears when we talk about traveling. And what they answer is that becoming ill and quarantine measures, as well as the rising COVID cases in the destinations, are the most the components that make them most doubtful about traveling in the short term. When we talk about important factors that are important for them to travel again within Europe, what we can say here is that the flexibility and cancellation policies that businesses provide are valued the most. As you can see, like we have number one here, flexible cancellation policies. It's much more important than bargains and attractive deals. And companies that are able to provide this flexibility and cancellation policies are much more likely to evolve stronger of this crisis than other companies that are just shooting attractive deals out there. Here, I also want to stress on the destination's effectiveness to managing CO emissions. This is apparently also very important for Generation Zers and confirms some things of the information about the sustainability topic that I just shared with you earlier. When we talk about the parts of the journey that are most concerning for Generation Zers, what they shared with us is that air travel is considered the least safe part of the journey. This is a trend that we actually see also among travelers from other age groups. It's more obvious, especially among people that are 35 years old or older, but apparently it's also very important for the youngest travelers. Other elements that are concerning during the trip are the attractions. So, for instance, visiting museums or being part of some group activity, the in-destination transportation, and the public areas. As you can see, accommodation, for instance, does not represent a big fear at the moment among members of these groups. So basically, these air travel attractions in destination transportations, these are the elements that destinations need to communicate around. They should make sure that all the protocols are followed and make travelers feel welcome and safe to come to the destination. When we talk about next travel plans, the majority of Generation Zers are actually eager to travel either outside Europe or to another European destinations. Domestic travel doesn't seem to be so interesting for these travelers, but of course this is most likely to be the case over the next months. When talking about traveling within Europe, the most attractive destinations that are classified by these age groups are France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and the UK. So basically the most popular European destinations worldwide. What we can say here actually from these findings is that considering that those are also some of the destinations where the situation is really not good at the moment, we can say that Generation Z's intention to travel in the next month, may not actually turn into real traveling, but they're just dreaming about their trip. When talking about next trip again, the majority of them intend to travel either with their family or partner, and the most desired types of trips will be city breaks, sun and beach, nature and outdoors, cultural heritage, and so on. Here it's actually very interesting to see that city breaks are higher and more desired than nature and outdoors, and because we've seen this trend over the summer. Many people were just wanting to isolate themselves, go to the outdoors, but what's happening over time is that people have this need to socialize, and this is actually one of the greatest values of tourism: the cultural exchange, the social exchange. And what I personally think that when we're kind of over with this crisis, people will be like really flowing to cities once again, to feel the vibe of different cultures, instead of only going to nature, for instance, and trying to isolate themselves. And finally, when we are talking about the accommodation choices, we don't see very big differences between Generation Zers and other consumers. The most preferred types of accommodations are the hotel chain or resorts and the independent hotels. Basically, what we understand with this is that travelers are feeling safer to go to some official accommodation establishments, because they think that protocols are followed, everything is under control, and so on. And as you can see, at the same time, like campings and caravans are ranking very low at the moment. This is, of course, also strongly connected with the seasonality. But yeah, at the moment, it's not the most desired option for accommodation. So these were basically the main trends that I wanted to share with you. I'm also glad to share with you the report on Generation Z travelers, where you can find a little bit more, and of course get back to us with any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the questions and answers session.
Dear Ljubljana, thank you for your presentation and for sharing your knowledge and insights. And I would like to welcome you to the question and answer session. How are you today?
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share our latest research. I'm doing very well. I hope everyone is doing well as well.
We're doing pretty well here in Lithuania. And the first question comes from Lithuania, posted by Udrus. What if Generation Z, Generation Y, they don't exist? Maybe it's just a myth?
Well, I think this is a very interesting question. And you cannot really say what is right, what is wrong. There is a generational theory which exists, and it's proven over the years. And here is the thing, that generations are usually shaped around the events that take place in history, and these kind of events are actually shaping the behavior of the particular generation. Now, there is also a theory, of course, that the years that we were born in are not as relevant for our travel behaviors, and we even have the same approach at the moment with our marketing activities. So instead of focusing on the demographic characteristics, we are focusing on people's passions for travel, because we believe that people from all ages can have a similar interest and behave in a similar way as the travelers. So I wouldn't say it's a myth, but it's a point of view that is very relevant, and in my opinion, tourism organizations can either market based on the generations, on the demographic characteristics, or if they want to go a little bit more niche and distinguish themselves, they could also forget about the generational distinguishment and focus on people's passions and interests as such.
Making the assumption that we can generalize the whole generation, do you notice any protests of Generation Z? I mean, they want to travel and they don't want to stop because of the pandemic. Do you notice that or no?
Well, I would say that at the beginning of the pandemic, so early spring, let's say, there were some findings and a lot of research on young people attitudes towards traveling, and indeed we could see that they were the most willing generation to travel, and they were not as worried about COVID-19. However, over the summer periods, with also a lot of increasing cases of people that are younger and not in the risk groups, this COVID crisis became more dominant in their minds, And the way this generation basically acts is that they have a lot of access to social media. They have a lot of access to a lot of information. In the cases when they see that their friends and their families are traveling, they will travel as well. In the cases, which is at the moment what we see, there is a lot of information and fake news about also COVID-19 and the restrictions and the risks. This is the generation that will react the fastest because they read this information first, and they're probably the most informed ones. So what we see at the moment is a decline in their intention to travel compared to the beginning of the crisis.
Okay, Udris is asking another question. So we see that Generation Z do not think about sustainable travels. Is it because we want to go to cities but not nature?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
You mentioned that the Generation Z is not very inclined for sustainable travels. Is it because they prefer traveling to cities but not to nature, or is it equal?
They're actually the generation that supports a sustainable travel the most compared to their older counterparts, the millennials and the baby boomers. They really look for the impact of the companies they choose to travel with, their impact on the environment, on the local communities, and so on. So this is actually one of the most important factors for them to select service provider.
A question, in which way do you see the self-improvement and the health development of Generation Z shaping the future of tourism products and services and offers? What do you see is the most important for tourism providers to not be left behind? In other words, in short, what do service providers need to focus on to grab the attention of Generation Z?
First of all, transparency. As I mentioned during my presentation, Generation Zers are very suspicious. They would really like the company to be open about all policies that they're following and so on. I think experiences that are off the beaten track, for instance, will be on high demand because they will provide opportunity for social distancing and also contributing to local communities and so on. I would say that companies really need to highlight the way that they can contribute to the development of Generation Z travelers. So basically, how will Generation Z improve their own personas when they visit your hotel, when they try your food? What will be their indirect and direct impact following the consumption of the product or the services? Yeah. One more thing that I would say as well that comes to my mind at the moment is that, for instance, for the accommodations establishments, we could say that this will become a more and more important part of the journey. And the younger travelers will be actually willing to pay more because they will perceive it not only as a place to sleep, but also as part of the whole experience. So this is where destinations could invest and businesses, of course.
Members of the Generation Z are still young and not necessarily have a lot of money to spend. Is it worth for the businesses to focus on them, or maybe it would be better to focus on more wealthy travelers?
Well, this is absolutely true because the youngest members of this generation are in primary school at the moment. However, as I mentioned in the presentation, this is already becoming the most popular generation on earth. It's very important to look at them right now and be prepared for the future. We'll have a lot of demand from markets that we are not used to see so much demand from. Another important point here is that although the Generation Zers are not the main decision makers for their trips, they're actually heavily impacting the choice of a whole family, for instance. So the family would actually listen to the preferences of these young travelers and will take their their decisions based on their children's preferences. So it's actually very important. And also the findings that I presented, these are consumer behaviors that are really likely to evolve in the future. Whether Generation Zers are currently traveling or not, these are their behaviors that really will continue, and business providers should take note of them, I think.
How much do you think the members of different generations, let's say, overlap? If business chooses to focus on Generation Z, will, let's say, more older travelers be also attracted, or the opposite result will happen?
I would say that, for instance, millennials and Generation Zers are very close to each other in the way they perceive traveling, because they travel since they were very young. Generation Zers are, however, more focused on this sustainability. It's really the first generation that really highlights the importance of sustainability, of ethnic diversity, all of these important topics. One thing that I could say is that we've seen already this trend of multi-generational travel, which usually contains, like, we have groups of people from different generations from one family that would be traveling somewhere. This is particularly a growing trend in China and in the US, for instance, and there we have representatives of all of these generations. So it definitely, there are definitely some matches, but if a company wants to distinguish their products in the eyes of generations there, they really need to dig into the differences, in fact. But also, of course, it depends on the market, I would say. I mean, there are too many factors, and acting only upon of the age of the travelers, we cannot really conclude that they're completely different or completely the same.
A very interesting point about multi-generational travel, but that the decision makers are the ones that are younger. That's a very interesting point of view. When we speak about Generation Z, should we distinguish between Central Europeans and the youth from the countries following strong cultural traditions? Should we consider that the youth from Turkey or India are the same as from Germany or France?
No, there are again differences, of course, because I would say that European Generation Zers are most probably more, how can I say, more experienced in relation to traveling, either them or their families. They're completely different backgrounds, and of course it depends what the destination is. Maybe we could say that for domestic travel, they'll most probably behave in the same way if they travel within their countries. Like Indian coming to Europe and European going to India, for instance, I don't think they will behave in the same way. This is a very complex question. It's very interesting, in fact.
Okay, thank you for that. Elena Kropinova from Kaliningrad, Russia. She's expressing her gratitude for your presentation, an overview of the Generation Z. Her question is, how many people were interviewed?
For this research, let me just check. Sorry. So we interviewed 800 respondents, and we interviewed them from 4 markets. These were China, Germany, UK, and the United States.
Okay, that's a very detailed answer. Thank you. And Andy from Nordic Tourism Collective is asking, with the importance of sustainability, does this represent a significant future opportunity for the Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Do we need to create more sustainable products? Can sustainable travel become the competitive advantage of the Baltic states? So to say?
Yes, it's. I think this we could say for all destinations, and not only in Europe but in general, because the tourism industry should move towards this direction, and younger travelers will really prioritize the sustainability products and experiences. They will also look into how the businesses work within their destination. So when they see, for instance, that a certain destination is overcrowded, they're much more likely to go to less crowded places. They're much more likely to not go on a trip if they know that the destination is already overcrowded. And this is very important and should be taken into account for strategies. And really, as much as it is an opportunity for the Baltic countries, it's also an opportunity for all destinations worldwide that want to develop in the right direction.
Okay, and probably the final question, a lighter one. What is the next country you want to visit, and when do you think you can get there?
Me?
Yes.
Well, I would actually travel outside Europe somewhere, most probably, I don't know, Patagonia, let's say, but I don't know. I'm not certain yet. Actually, my focus at the moment is within Europe and discovering European treasures. And yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the day that we'll be traveling with a high confidence and yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Ljubljana, for joining us, for sharing your presentation, and for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, have a nice day. Thank you so much. And well, we are approaching the end of our today's session. So let's quickly recap what we experienced today. We kicked off the day with Vitaly Vladikin, who talked about the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism industry, the new reality, and the new opportunities. He was followed by Dr. Diana Šaparnienė and her insights on youth networking for sustainable tourism development in the Baltic Sea region. Then we listened to Professor Stefan Gjösling on how COVID-19 could change mobility. And lastly, we listened to Ms. Ljubljana Dimova, who helped us to understand the Generation Z travelers and their preferences in the context of COVID-19. I'd say it was a pretty fruitful day, but it's only the beginning. The forum will last until the end of the week with high-level meetings on Friday. On Thursday, again, I would like to kindly invite you to join us for the main event. It will start at 9:30 a.m. Lithuanian time. We are very eager to see you then. And tomorrow is a big day because for the first time, as I mentioned before, we will have the Baltic Sea Region Sustainable Tourism Awards. They will start at 2 p.m. So don't forget to iron your shirt and get your dress ready and join for the celebration. As for today, I'm grateful that you joined. I'm very grateful that you were active in Slido for posting questions. I hope you learned how to use the platform and will use it on the next days to follow as well. And remembering to mention your name as well and your country. As for today, my name is Vytautas. It has been a huge pleasure and I will see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to the magical city of Palanga by the Baltic Sea, known for its long-standing orchestral music tradition, counting already a 2nd century. It was probably brought by Count Tiškevič from the old Europe during his late 19th century trips. But nobody really knows where it all began. It's been some struggle to preserve the orchestral music traditions initiated by the Counts. Nevertheless, today, Palanga is proud to host the exceptionally prestigious and essential for the region European Brass Band Championships of 2020. So the local guys and girls want to show how to make the best of Palanga. All options are possible for you to get here. Get on a plane, on a boat, a train, a bus or a car. And when you're here, take the smaller means to get around. Don't worry about the accommodation. We will get our cozy local homes, as well as fancy hotels ready for any type of request. Dining in a blue sky beach in addition to your stay can also be, indeed, rejuvenating. Choose from a variety of eating places. We will invite you to some of the most gourmet restaurants in the city. Well, if these guys also let us, I do guarantee you will find the best entertainment here. The rides, the water fun, the souvenirs, the park, and place for your children, the cinema, the pool, some spas. Whoa, calm down now. And a marvelous amber museum. So we can offer you lots and lots to experience. And we are very much looking forward for you to see our stunning concert hall.